That was the King's speech. Up until yesterday, I thought it was just a rather good film. Suddenly, it's a reality. That was King Charles III addressing the nation, broadcast to the nation, indeed to the world. Many of the big American networks took that speech live, as did some in Australia and elsewhere. So how did he do? Well, I have to say, I thought he did incredibly well. He may not be the world's most natural orator, but I thought there was, to begin with, a great personal passion. The way he talked about his mother, and indeed touching upon his father too, they were words that actually really will resonate with many, many people at home. What he also said I thought was very interesting. He reaffirmed the fact that he will be the head of the church without getting into the controversial territory of perhaps becoming defender of the faiths, plural, as opposed to defender of the faith. But there was one part of that speech that really was, I thought, very, very interesting. He talked about the fact that he won't have as much time in future as he had before. And therefore, the charities and the issues that he'd fought for and believed in, he would have to leave to others. Now, that was a very willful, very deliberate, I felt, attempt by, and I'm still finding it difficult to say King Charles III, because I think of him still as the Prince of Wales. It was a very, very deliberate effort to say to the world, he no longer will be a political campaigner. We're not going to hear from him on climate change, etc., etc. He knows those things could be deeply controversial as king. That, I thought, was very significant. He talked about William and Kate. He said, as of today, they become the Prince and Princess of Wales, a title, of course, he himself has had since 1969, when he went through that ceremony at Carnarvon. That was unsurprising. What was interesting, I thought, was the reference that he made to Harry and Meghan, who he emphasised have chosen their new life overseas. It was as if Prince Charles, now the King, was saying they live in America, that is the end of that, and basically they're not coming back. They were the big takeouts that I got from that speech. He was calm. He was composed. He looked dignified. I thought he did it very, very well indeed. And that, coming from somebody who's not always been his biggest fan. Indeed, he and I have had our disagreements over the years, to say the very least. One in particular in the European Parliament, where he gave this speech, and he was really asking for the European Union to have more power to deal with issues. And at the end of it, I just sat with my arms folded, and everyone else stood up, and that caused a bit of a stir. And the next time I saw him, before a speech he was giving, he said, "Nigel, you're absolutely going to hate this one," which did show he had a good sense of humour. So I've not always been his single biggest fan, but I thought that was a very, very, very good start to him being king. Now, London today has been pretty extraordinary. I witnessed this morning, at around about 1 o'clock today, I witnessed streams of people walking down the Mall, coming from other streets, heading towards Buckingham Palace. The majority of them carrying in their hands small or large posies of flowers. What was interesting about the crowd, watching them as they moved towards the palace and as the throng gathered outside the gates, was the silence. You could hear cars going by. You could hear the odd aeroplane in the sky. People were barely talking to each other. There was a sort of laser-like vision on where they were going. And I myself went to the palace gates last night at about 11:30. And I stood there, I laid down my flowers, I bowed my head, I looked up, and behind the gates I saw the balcony, where I'd witnessed with my own eyes on the Thursday of that amazing Jubilee weekend, the Queen, for the last time, come out onto that balcony. And I looked there and I thought, we're never going to see that again. And I must say, that really did hit me. But it was very incongruous, this crowd of people with their flowers, paying their respects in private, and yet, at 1 o'clock, in the background, from Hyde Park, the massive 96-gun salute. London today has been a very, very strange slightly more silent than usual, but strange place. And people are coming to terms with accepting that this extraordinary figure, who has been an absolute constant throughout their lives, has gone. And as I said at the start of this talk, it's almost difficult to believe that we're talking about King Charles III. But we